Hello, you are on the Ruslan Belov channel. Today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine as of May 10th, 2025. An enormous number of events have occurred today, so let's get started. Before we begin, I'd sincerely like to ask you to subscribe to the channel. Your subscription helps the channel grow. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed. Only a few hours remain until the end of the May ceasefire. Let's start with the northern section of the front. Specifically the northern border between Ukraine and Russia, Chernihiv region, and the north of Sumy region. If we look at the map, we can notice a large number of geolocations. Russian artillery units and Russian FPV drones are mainly active in the Chernihiv and Sumy directions. At first glance, it might seem like nothing special or interesting, just the usual daily picture we're used to seeing. But there is one small nuance. If we increase the number of updates starting from May 1st, 2025, and analyze a broader set of data, we begin to realize that something is happening in the northern parts of the Ukrainian regions. Particular attention should be paid to the area between the borders of Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine. It's also worth noting the strip along the Bryansk region. Such a high concentration of artillery strikes indicates that some Ukrainian armed forces groups might be concentrated here. These forces could be launched into battle soon, or perhaps the Russian army is preparing a new offensive, one that may begin just after May 10th, 2025, in just a few hours. We'll be keeping a close eye on this section of the front, as something may be about to happen there. Next, we move on to the Tetkino front line. Reports are coming in that heavy fighting is currently taking place in Tetkino. Here, the ceasefire does not apply, nor did the temporary truce cover this settlement. Active combat has been ongoing daily here. Despite the heavy fighting, we can see that the Ukrainian side is not advancing, while the Russian side is steadily holding the line. Some buildings might be surrendered, and there may be small tactical withdrawals, but they are so minor and localized that they don't even result in map changes, even though battles around Tetkino have been ongoing for over 5 days. This suggests that Ukrainian units may lack the manpower, will, or ability to fully complete this battle. Again, I must stress, there is a high probability that all of this fighting is just a background noise, meant to distract the global community from events that have recently taken place in Moscow. Next, we move on to the Sumy front, or more precisely, the Belgorod-Sumy direction. Today, reports indicate that the Russian armed forces have taken full control of the village of Marina, located south of Dnipropetrovsk. This information has been circulating for the past 2 days among certain experts and cartographers. Yesterday it was being shared by some reliable pro-Russian sources. Today, even neutral cartographers have confirmed it. According to the incoming reports, the Russian armed forces entered the village of Marina and pushed Ukrainian formations further west toward the settlements of Prokhody and Turia. This means Marina, a settlement in the Sumy region, may now be part of the so-called security zone that the President of the Russian Federation spoke about several months ago. Next, we move to the Kupiansk front, and more precisely, the southern Kupiansk direction, the Lyman axis. There is nothing noteworthy on the northern side, but the Lyman direction has once again undergone significant changes on the map. Over the past, likely 72 hours, starting from the beginning of the ceasefire, Russian units have managed to significantly expand their control. The flower of Lyman is blooming, so to speak. Let's go in order, beginning with the village of Hrekivka. Hrekivka has been the objective of the Russian army over the past week, to approach it closely and take full control. This direction has seen the highest number of geolocations and adjustments over the past week. Let's now look at how the map has changed in recent days. It appears that the advance toward Hrekivka from Makivka began a few days ago, around May 6th, 2025, or possibly earlier, depending on how quickly geolocation data becomes available. The Russian army is currently trying to move along this very route, and along this axis we've been receiving daily updates to the front line. We can see that the Russian army is gradually advancing toward the settlement. Yes, Hrekivka is still a ways off, but the distance has certainly been reduced. The Russian army is also slowly advancing from the Novomikhailivka side. Some cartographers have noted an expanded control zone to the north of Novomikhailivka. According to neutral cartographers, very important strongpoints around the village have come under Russian control. Over the past day, this is the approximate movement of the Russian army. We can see that the advance is also heading towards settlements such as Novyi Mir, Olhivka, Druzhelyubivka, and again toward Hrikivka. This is how the map has changed over the past 2 days, based on reports from various cartographers. So far, there have been no geolocated photo or video confirmations, but they may appear in the near future. So it appears that the Russian army is trying to establish a kind of buffer zone. To create this buffer zone, the Russian army needs to concentrate on Hlushkov, Novy Mir, Olhivka, Druzhlyubivka, and Hrikivka. This buffer zone would allow for the creation of a safety cushion, and once this safety cushion is established, the Russian army will be able to advance southward toward Lyman more safely and with greater confidence. For now, moving in the direction of Lyman is difficult, because at any moment a counterstrike could come from the Berova grouping of Ukrainian armed forces, which includes a substantial number of modernized brigades, including the 3rd Assault Brigade. Next, we move on to the settlement of Novoe. The main developments here are unfolding around the village of Ridkodub. According to some cartographers, the Russian armed forces have approached both the northwestern and southeastern outskirts of the village. At this moment, there is an ongoing attempt to take control of the first streets of the village, where fighting is currently taking place. In other words, the Russian army is expected to resume its offensive here within the next few hours. Apparently, the battles in this area will be of very high intensity, slightly to the south, with the main fighting centered around the village of Kodiazi. There is also information that the Russian armed forces have managed to firmly entrench themselves in the easternmost part of the settlement. By the end of May 10th, the Russian army already controls approximately 10%, or possibly more, of the village. Simultaneously with the eastern advance, reports also indicate movement through the fields, with the aim of flanking Kodiazi and reaching its western outskirts. These are the adjustments some cartographers have made over the past 24 hours. Again, this progress likely did not occur during the ceasefire, but rather was achieved by the Russian army before the ceasefire was announced. What we are seeing now is essentially the aftermath or echo of those earlier events. Now we move to the Siversk section of the front, where the Russian army continues to assault the village of Verneoka. And here we can clearly see that the pace of the Russian advance is steadily increasing. The offensive toward Verneoka with the aim of encircling it began around May 5th to 6th, right after Russian units managed to secure positions in the central part of Hrihorivka. The advance toward Verneoka has been conducted from 2 directions. From the north, aiming to reach the western outskirts, and from the south, aiming to block the farms located in the central part. This farm complex is a major fortified area for the Ukrainian armed forces. Let's take a look at how the map has changed over the past few days. Initial reports came of a breakthrough in the north and also flanking maneuvers around the settlement. Then, information started coming from the very center of Verneoka itself. Here we observe Russian troops advancing from building to building under attacks from Ukrainian FPV drones, specifically from the 54th Mechanized Brigade. And now there are reports that Russian forces have taken the tree lines along the perimeter to the south of Verneoka and the farms. This significantly increases the chances that the Ukrainian units currently at the farms are either cut off from supplies or will soon abandon this fortified area, as defending it further would become extremely difficult with the collapse of central Verneoka. We can now start counting down to when the Russian vanguard and reconnaissance and sabotage groups begin entering or approaching the eastern outskirts of Siversk itself. Next, we move on to the Chasiv Yar direction. Here, there are no significant changes. Footage of combat for the central area continues to be published through objective control sources. However, despite expectations that Russian troops would manage to force out Ukraine's 24th Brigade from the central area before the May holidays, we can still see that intense fighting continues. At the same time, we are receiving a large volume of information from the Claybenic direction. The map here has become more active. For a long time, the main developments occurred on the southwestern flank, in the area of the settlements of Novopoltavka, Novoalenivka, Malinivka, and Tarasivka. But just in the past few days, some new information has emerged from the southeastern flank. According to available reports, the Russian armed forces managed to significantly expand their control zone before the ceasefire began. This information comes from both neutral and pro-Russian experts. Let's take another look. This is what the map looked like by the end of May 9, 2025. As of today, most of the H20 highway is under the control of Russian units, along with several company-level strongpoints and key defensive positions along the highway. In effect, the core of Ukrainian defenses on the Claybenic direction has been broken. This defensive core was located along the H20 route, with a network of strongpoints that are now at least 70 to 80% under Russian control. We can also see that Russian units have advanced to the southeastern outskirts of the settlement of Romanivka, which is a key location in this area. If the Russian army succeeds in capturing Romanivka completely, then possibly after May 10th, starting on the 11th, a large-scale offensive may begin on this section of the front. If the Ukrainian side loses control, Russian troops will essentially reach open operational ground with the ability to continue advancing, including in a northeasterly direction, to strike toward the settlements of Katerinivka and Claybenic. This would give the Russian army a strong opportunity to encircle, or even fully trap, Ukrainian forces that are currently concentrated around Sherbinivka and Novospasivka. A very fierce and intense battle should be expected for these positions in the near future. At the same time, the Russian side is tightening the noose from the southwestern flanks as well, gradually advancing from Novoalenivka toward Yablunivka and Oleksandr Kaliniv, and also steadily clearing out Oleksandropil with the goal of reaching the western outskirts of the settlements of Zoria, Hanativka, and Staromykolaivka. Here, it is likely that after the end of the ceasefire, we will see the most intense battles. Next, we move to the Dnipropetrovsk direction, heading toward the Dnipropetrovsk region. There are also numerous geolocated updates here. Over the past 24 hours, the Russian army has significantly expanded its zone of control, including in Novoserehiyivka. There is now no doubt that the western part of the village is firmly under Russian control, and Russian units are gradually advancing toward the border with the Dnipropetrovsk region. This information is confirmed by geolocation and will be added to the map shortly. Further south, Russian units from the direction of Kotlyarivka are gradually advancing through forest lines toward Nova Mykolaivka and Muravka. This is supported by reports from various cartographers, pro-Russian, neutral, and even pro-Ukrainian, though the latter report more limited progress. There is also video footage from the area near Kotlyarivka. At this time, we are not using this footage as definitive evidence for map updates, as there are still doubts about the status of Kotlyarivka. The video, published by Ukraine's 72nd Mechanized Brigade, shows close quarters fighting between Ukrainian and Russian units in the village's central part. A Russian soldier was trapped in a small building and surrounded by a 4-man Ukrainian assault group. It was a brief but intense clash at that location, showing both Russian and Ukrainian troops present. This confirms that active combat is ongoing in the village. However, the very fact that fighting is happening inside the village suggests that the Russian army is likely to intensify its offensive and increase pressure on the inter-regional border and the Novopavlivka axis. We can also observe that the Russian side is steadily expanding its control along the forest belts. The front line is currently being evened out, and the bridgehead is being widened in preparation for a potential push toward Novopavlivka. Today, information emerged that individual Russian units have entered the eastern outskirts of the settlement of Horokova. Heavy fighting is currently ongoing there. This is effectively the last settlement before the regional border. As for the southern segment of this zone, there are also new map updates. A salient between Andriivka and Bodanivka is being gradually cut off. This is supported by various mapping sources. The Ukrainian armed forces are retreating from this bulge due to clear risks of encirclement, as the Russian army is actively advancing toward Bohatyr and Alexeyevka, where Ukrainian defenses appear to have been breached. We now have map adjustments confirmed by geolocation data. Footage from around the southeastern perimeter of Bohatyr shows FPV drone strikes, likely carried out by Ukraine's 46th or 79th Brigade. The strikes target buildings on the edge of Bohatyr, indicating that Russian troops are present in the village. Just minutes before this video report was finalized, another video was released from the eastern outskirts of Alexeyevka. A similar situation is unfolding there. Russian assault troops are occupying buildings under attack from Ukrainian drones. Let's take a look at how the map has changed over the past 24 hours. Just yesterday, by the end of May 9th, Russian units were still some distance away. Though there were initial geolocation reports, mainly from pro-Russian sources, indicating that Russian forces had entered both Bohutyr and Alexeyevka. Today, new geolocations confirm this information. It appears that the Russian army has managed to establish a foothold in both settlements. At this point, it seems only a matter of time before Ukrainian forces are forced to withdraw from both locations. These are the last defense lines, essentially marking the boundary between the Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk regions. The pace of the Russian advance here is accelerating, and it seems likely that after May 11th, the offensive will intensify even further. And that's all for now, dear friends. Subscribe to the channel, give a like, and stay in touch with us.